Hello, everyone, and welcome to Elevating Your Life. A great show ahead today. Today, we are chatting with Shelley Knight, and she is the author of Good Grief, The A to Z Approach of Modern Day Grief Healing, and award-winning podcaster of Positive Changes, a self-kick podcast. And Shelley F Knight was a nurse for many, many years. She was a clinical hypnotherapist turned writer who provides an eclectic blend of clinical, holistic, and spiritual expertise in her specialist subjects of positive change, spirituality, and grief. And her book, Good Grief, is absolutely amazing. I loved it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Shelley, you have so much wisdom and beautiful words to share in this book. So first off, I want to say welcome to the show.
Bless you. Thank you so much for the introduction and the book and everything positive you shared already.
You are so welcome. I've been so excited to share you with everyone. Gosh, I've been counting the days.
Oh, bless you.
Well, let's begin with, would you like to share a little more of your history? I know, thank you for your nursing years, everything, and kind of what triggered you to write this unbelievably amazing book.
Yeah, so I did nurse for many years and I loved it. And the strange thing was that when I went into healthcare, obviously the emphasis was health, and I wasn't really prepared for the amount of death and grief that was to follow, as I'd never really lost anyone in my life apart from our family dog. But as I started my career in nursing, even as a student nurse, loss started to come into my personal life. And I know, like, lost my grandparents, my stepdad and aunties. And with every loss, I changed as a person. So my background's very clinical, like nursing, clinical hypnotherapy. But as I changed and witnessed death and grief time and time again, I started to go towards the spiritual, that we're more than the physical body. What's the life lesson in this? And many other lessons. I'm still learning, I'm sure.
Oh, I love it. And, so what would you say, simply, what is grief? How would you characterize what grief is for us?
Yeah, so I get quite feisty about this because when I wrote Good Grief, I really want to get across that grief isn't just death of a loved one, that's actually bereavement. So grief is the loss of anything with which we have an emotional connection. So we trigger a grief process when we lose anything like our health, sense of control, direction, finances, jobs, relationships. When we lose these things that are a key part of our life, then we can experience grief. It doesn't just have to be death of a loved one.
Yes, yes. And dealing with grief, would you say there's just a huge variety of how we deal with grief? The different ways, directions it can take us.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many different types of grief, which is what I discovered when writing Good Grief. So when I was a student nurse, I wasn't young, I was 28. That's a class as a mature student here in the UK. But there was sort of like, you either had normal grief, delayed grief, or absent grief. That was it. You was either crying, not crying, or you would in the future. But even before the pandemic, there was like around 17 types of grief. I think the pandemic's going to show multifaceted aspects of grief, but there's so many different types of grief, and then we all do things differently. Like, our grief is unique as our fingerprint, because how we handle grief or move forward is based on all our life experiences up to that loss, all previous losses, our environment, like the people around us, how we've witnessed other people grieve. So like, my family's really open about grief, and we cry and snot and all the unattractive, ugly crying. We're very open. This is how I feel. But others are very much chin up, sweep it under the carpet, we say here. So yeah, grief is huge. I mean, you can define it in a sentence, but it is a vast subject, and we all grieve very, very differently.
Yes, yes. And that really makes it an individual way of dealing with grief and processing. Would you say grief is something we really need to process?
Yeah, absolutely.
Move
I
on.
think we push so much down in life, whether it is grief or an experience, we just push it down, think I'll deal with it later, or put a sticky plaster on it, or we believe that, being real and authentic and raw is a sign of weakness, or we're too busy. But I just think, if you push it down somewhere, it will come back up. It's not healing, it's like a wound. I can say that as a nurse, like with a wound, if you try and put a sticky plaster over it and leave it, generally it will fester. You have to be a lot more proactive, in life.
Yes. And would you say something that we can have to deal with at times is what you call the timing of a loved one's death? We can, like with your nursing, someone can be out of the room when a loved one passes. And what does that kind of situation, what can those do in affecting how we deal with grief?
I think timing of death is so key to talk about as much as grief itself. And for the listeners today, I have to say that if you weren't there by your loved one's side, you weren't meant to be there. I've seen the human spirit hold on while people have flown from Germany, America, wherever, to get there. And, that person will hold on. But more often than not, our loved ones don't want us to be there by their bedside, watching that last breath, holding that memory.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly, one thing we take from today's show would be like, if you weren't there, you weren't meant to be there. It's their way of protecting you, their last act of love. And so please do not hold on to guilt, would or should have, and all of that. No family arguments. I was here, you wasn't, or whatever. That's not how it's meant to end. I am that nurse that used to send people off with a cup of tea and they would, often die. But, I've had it in my own family, like my gran, she passed while I was just miles away from the house. And, she wouldn't have wanted me. We had so much love in our life, so much laughter. And, she wouldn't have wanted me there, I'm sure. But yeah, I have this real deep spirituality about me now, which has come from loss. And I don't believe we are ever alone at our point of death. I think we're like met by people, like loved ones, guides, colours, whatever. Yes. So you're never alone. So please don't ever think, you did something wrong. You weren't meant to be there.
Yes, yes. And, and it's so fascinating, and it actually can really bring you comfort in knowing that, seeing the death of a loved one, we're really just seeing them leave that physical body. Their soul is living on. Their soul is still alive and looking over us and living. Talk about a person's soul. What is your perception of that, Shelley?
So I'm quite a simple soul. And I see it as almost like we have like a little time capsule in us. So like, I'll have a different physical body, but I believe every time I reincarnate, it's kind of with a sense of amnesia that I can't remember why I'm here, the life lessons why I came. But I believe the soul just constantly evolves, and that's the sort of the knowledge-based part of you, your personality. So, that's the thing about the time of death. Again, you're sitting there looking at a physical body, but the soul will, go on and evolve, maybe come back into your life in another way. And so I believe the soul comes down for earthly lessons, because I find earth quite a heavy energy. And then we go back to source, back to love, and we just keep evolving. But I do believe the soul, that sort of knowledge base of us, the pure essence of who we are, isn't in that physical body when people are still there. I think it's left like an act of self-protection, especially in quite traumatic deaths like road traffic accidents and things like that. We leave the body, the soul leaves. I think it's kind of beautiful. We never have to think about the timing of death. In trauma as well, I believe the soul's already gone back to a place of love by then.
Yes. And it's really fascinating to think about what I call my soul planner. My soul planner, okay, many of the things I've gone through in my life, I think my soul may have planned these challenges and planned these things for me to learn something or to, move to a higher level. And it's fascinating to think about, once they move out of the physical body, then my soul planner, I think, is going to be making the plans for my next physical body. It really is fascinating, Shelley.
Yeah, I did past life regression. Like one of the key reasons I did clinical hypnotherapy was to then go on to do past life regression. And anyone that's done past life regression will know you have to regress so many times to get rid of all of your stuff that you're carrying. And so I've been back to the life between life, which I talk about in Good Grief. And there it's where I've ended my past incarnation, my life before this one. And I've signed up, that you call it the soul plan. It's like, what am I coming here for? And it really helped me on a comfort level, because it hasn't been an easy life. That's hence all the wrinkles, Paula. It hasn't been an easy life. But there's a real comfort to knowing that I'm here for a reason. It goes back to the soul again, that I'm here for a learning, for my benefit, for the people behind my family. But, if people have said to me like, but you chose this, and I didn't have that knowledge, that experience of the life between life, I think I'd be quite miserable, actually. I'd find life always challenging, but I know I'm here to learn. And I draw comfort from that.
Yes. And there really is comfort in that. And I love that analogy, wrinkles in life. And it's wrinkles in life. And then we just try to smooth them out and move on and learn. Oh, I love that. I love that.
I should call it experience line, shouldn't I, rather than wrinkles, maybe?
I love it. I love it. No, I think that's a great description, because, here we are now, and I think about, well, I don't know what happened prior, but I know I'm here for a reason, and there were things that were meant to be and things that were meant for me to learn. And that's really fascinating. So I can imagine doing past life regressions, some of the, oh my gosh, the experiences and things that would be realized from people's past lives. Wow.
Yeah, no, I loved it. I haven't done it like in the year, obviously we've had the pandemic, I sort of stepped away from it, but it gives you a tool to try outside of the conventional ones that we deal with in grief, like the talking therapies or medication. And it is, it just helps you make sense of it, and I think it was Viktor Frankl said, we don't suffer from suffering alone, we only suffer when there's no meaning. And I think when we understand why we're going through something, it just makes it okay. It's almost like a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes.
I love it personally as a tool.
Oh, yes. When you can visualize and realize there is a meaning to this, that is like giving you a light at the end of the tunnel. Yes. And you also, in your book, and this is something I'm so fascinated in, you mentioned near-death experiences.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about that.
So I first came across near-death experiences as a slightly overwhelmed student nurse when I was working in ITU, and people would sort of explain, like in surgery or in an accident, like road traffic accident, that they'd viewed themselves from a different place that wasn't Earth. And I just, people say, oh, it's the anesthetic, it's the brain trauma. But that's how it started. But I've looked into it, and it is when you, in this life, I was always told there's 3 exit points in your life where you can choose to leave. And I don't know if that's true, but I know we all have these moments where you get to a point where you go out of your body, probably out of this world, to another dimension, and you review your life in split seconds. And it is sort of like, do you want to go back and find meaning or purpose, or are you ready to go? And I've interviewed people on my podcast about it. The wonderful David Ditchfield, who, was pulled under a train, and then is the most prolific sort of musician and artist now. So it's hard to explain, but if people research into it, it's fascinating.
Yes.
And it's not confused with out-of-body experiences. That's when you go out of the body, but you're still very much on the earthly plane. This is to another dimension.
Yes.
But it's fascinating. And it is those conversations, whether as the scared student nurse or the podcast host, where it just, again, that other kind of comfort, you know, you're more than this physical body. You know, you return to a place of love, which is a beautiful lesson to learn again and again.
Yes. And I've interviewed David Ditchfield, and yes, his story is one of the stories that has me so fascinated with near-death experiences. And is it true that we can even have a near-death experience? I mean, our soul can leave our body, I would say, while we're sleeping?
Yeah, so I honestly think we can. I've seen it in the past life regression where sort of people like astral travel and stuff like that. But in past life regression, it's during trauma where you dissociate from your body, whether that's in a past life or this life. And I think it's kind of beautiful safety net. So if you are going through a trauma, like a physical trauma, then your soul naturally disengages to protect you.
Yes.
And I just think that's beautiful.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Something that you mention in the book is called the grief voice box. Tell us about that.
So I worked as a chemotherapy nurse for most of my nursing career, and a lot of that, sadly, is, you know, either people being given a life-changing diagnosis and so they then go all on in, having faced their own mortality, or they don't respond to treatment and it's end of life. So either of those lend themselves to very profound conversations where you need to talk about, well, all the things you wish you'd have said in life.
Yeah.
But people don't openly have these conversations. You know, we don't talk about the regrets, we don't talk about the life lessons, and it's really important to get these conversations out so that, you know, these people aren't passing with terminal agitation with these words still inside of them.
Yes.
So I've put in there about communication because it's key. I mean, you know, we were saying about the timing of death earlier, where people want to sit by the bedside, but use that time, that precious time, to have a conversation. And people get really awkward around communication. So there's a whole section in the book about, if you don't know what to say, let's keep it simple. Say, I don't know what to say. And, you know, people just think, you know, I've had the most almost awful things said to me in my grief, but I would far rather someone said something to me and get it what I perceive as slightly wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Than to not acknowledge my grief or me. You know, so many people, like when my stepdad died or I had a miscarriage, so many people would make me feel invisible. They would cross the road, they wouldn't talk, just normal conversations stop. So just carry on. And, you know, I always say, don't go, oh, you know where I am if you need me. When you're in grief, that's a massive thing. Just say, how are you today? Is there anything I can do as I stand before you? And it's just, yeah, real key things in communication, just to get people talking, whether you're the dying or you're a friend of the griever. There's even a section in there about how to have communication around the pending death of an unloved one, because there's still that physical and emotional connection at some point before then. So yeah, the voice box is about using your voice box.
Yes, yes. And, you know, it's really true when someone we know and care about is going through grief, that you can actually just, I don't know what to say, so I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to act like, you know, we're really speaking about it and bringing it up. So would you say really is what's going to be helpful for that person, and it's okay to speak about it?
Yeah, as I say, if you don't know what to say, I don't know what to say. And if it's someone you know, like your best friend's mum died or something, then just have that normal conversation. What would you normally say to them? Would you joke around about, you know, a TV series or an awful breakfast you had? You know, just keep the conversations there and just keep it in that moment. Say anything you need today, is anything you need right now? You know, what can I do for you this morning? Just keep it short and simple. But, you know, that person's life has changed, but their way of communication hasn't. So just say something, even if it's, I don't know what to say.
Yeah. And, that's really a great point, Shelley. When we're going through grief, our life has changed.
Yeah.
We are on a new pattern, especially if it's someone we're close to that we've, been with, maybe chatting with every day. When we're going through grief of losing someone, our life really has changed. And that is, stepping further is a one day at a time thing, isn't it?
Yeah, sometimes it's almost like minute by minute or hour by hour, because there's so many different stages. Like initially, like when someone dies, I know like when my beautiful stepdad died, it was just hardly any time to grieve, because you're sort of contacting people, then loads of flowers arrive, and then you've got to do the funeral and the practicalities and the bizarre thing of choosing the wood for the coffin and the flowers, and you go into automatic pilot. But like that sticky plaster we said earlier, it's got to come back up at some point. And so, yeah, I think, why it's important for me to write in there about, I talk about the afterlife, but life thereafter as well, because I try and prepare you that, you'll have to go back to a new way of life, but people get on with their life. And that initial support system carries on, goes off into their life. So, don't be afraid to ask for help as well if you are the one grieving. Communication's two ways. If you want help, reach out.
Yes. Thank you. So, reach out and say to someone, I'm struggling, I would like help. That's a huge message. Well, Shelley, with a few minutes left in the show, what last words do you want to leave everyone? What would be your greatest message you could share today about dealing with grief or helping someone else to deal with grief?
The best way to grieve is to grieve. As we've gathered, I don't believe in anything you go through in life like covering up. Just get it out, because I truly believe it does manifest in the long term. And just start simple, like really sit with yourself, like 10 minutes a day. I'm thinking an hour, but I know it can be overwhelming in grief, but just 10 minutes a day, whether you don't feel sad with grief, you've had an amazing day. So 10 minutes a day, just sit in silence with yourself. And people think, oh, that's simple, but that 10 minutes of silence brings up so much. I think that's why we keep ourselves so busy. So whether you're grieving or not, just every day, just sit in silence with yourself for 10 minutes and just tap into that inner world, that soul, and see what you need to do.
Yes. And that is that 10 minutes of silence, that is tapping into our soul and ourself. And would you say it's, a wonderful time to just say, I love you to yourself? We don't do that very often, do we?
No, do say I love you. And I love, like Louise Hay, she used to say, like, look in a mirror. But people, like when I did my coaching program, really struggled with it. And they'd, start saying hello, or I could learn to like you. So yeah, start, meet yourself where you're currently at and build up your self-love from there. Become your own best friend and rely on that.
Yes, because I know myself with my morning affirmations, I will also forgive myself for, through our lifetime, we always think, what if I did this, or if I could have done that? And we need to forgive ourselves and love ourselves. I think that's a great message. And I think that will help us with grief as well. But your book, the book, Good Grief, Shelley F Knight, I mean, your book covered so many different areas and topics that people can use with information and dealing with grief. I just absolutely loved it, Shelley.
Oh, bless you. I tried to ambitiously squeeze 30 years in healthcare into the pages and almost 50 years in life, because, like when I wrote that book and Positive Changes, a self-kick book, I don't believe one size fits all. So I've put in like loads of tools. Some will resonate, some won't, but just, if you're going to have that 10 minutes a day and you don't want silence, do one of the 10-minute tools each day and keep healing.
Yes, yes. The information is just going to be so beneficial to so many of us. Well, tell everyone where they can get a copy of your book or learn more about you. What would you like to share?
So I've got a website, which is shelleyfknight.com, and the books there, social media, podcasts, a little bit about me and all of me qualifications and things like that. And the book, Good Grief, The A to Z Approach of Modern Day Grief Healing, is out now, and it's on Amazon, Kindle, Barnes and Noble, anywhere you can buy a book online. Yeah. And yeah, it is, about grief for death of a loved one, but also from the pandemic where we've all lost something on some level.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Treat yourself. Yeah.
Yes. And all your years of nursing, you are a hero. I just have so much gratitude to everyone in the medical field and all they do for others. And, the little bits of so many different things you share information on is just going to be huge for so many of us. And I really have to thank you for that gift, Shelley.
Oh, bless you. Thank you so much for your words. I truly appreciate you.
Oh, you are so welcome. And I am sending a big hug from the US to the UK. Oh, I love it. I love it. That is one place I haven't been yet, but that's on my list.
Oh, come visit.
I'm going to one day. I'm going to. So everyone out there, thank you for joining us today. And thank you for being with me every week. And I love sharing my amazing guests with you. And Shelley, you are really a gift to us. Shelley, thank you so much. Love, hugs, and blessings. And to everyone, have an absolutely beautiful day.